Las Vegas, Nevada, April 6, 1987. The entire city is here for one fight. Sugar Ray Leonard versus Marvelous Marvin Hagler, the biggest boxing match of the decade. Celebrities in every seat, money in every pocket. The kind of night where men who would never meet in ordinary life end up standing next to each other at a bar, shaking hands, exchanging numbers. Two men shake hands that night. One is a young hustler from Washington, D.C., named Rayful Edmond, 20 years old, already moving weight in the capital, already building something, but he has a problem. His supply is inconsistent, expensive, unreliable. He needs a better connect. The other is a man from Los Angeles named Melvin Butler, a member of the Crips who works for a man most people in that room have never heard of. A man from South Central who has quietly built the largest distribution pipeline in America, connecting the Cali cartel in Colombia directly to the streets of Black America. His name is Brian Bennett. The streets call him Waterhead Bo. And the handshake that happens between these two men at a boxing match in Las Vegas is about to do something that no single act of violence, no single arrest, no single federal operation could ever do. It is going to destroy an entire city. Within 14 months of that handshake, the percentage of people arrested in Washington, D.C. who test positive will jump from under 50% to 67%. Entire neighborhoods will be consumed. The capital of the United States will become the capital of something else entirely. But that is only one thread, because Waterhead Bo's pipeline does not just feed Rayful Edmond. It feeds a man in Los Angeles whose money will fund the first Black-produced Broadway hit in American history, starring a young actor named Denzel Washington. And then that same man's money will fund a record label that will give the world Tupac, Snoop Dogg, and Dr. Dre. One pipeline, one man in the middle, and a chain that connects a Colombian cartel to an epidemic, to a Broadway stage, to the most famous record label in the history of hip-hop. This is the story of the man who connected the Cali cartel to everything. And it starts with a kid from South Central who saw the whole thing as a business opportunity. This is that story. Brian Bennett grows up in South Central Los Angeles, a small house on Florence Avenue, a mother who works hard, a neighborhood where the legitimate economy is dying and the other economy is the only one hiring. By the mid-1980s, the price of powdered product has been falling for years. The market for selling to wealthy white buyers has peaked. The Colombian cartels, sitting on mountains of supply, need a new customer base. And they find one: the inner city. The Cali cartel has a man in California. The feds know him only as Oscar. Oscar is the cartel's main connection on the West Coast. And Oscar has a protege, a Colombian who moved to California in 1983, named Mario Ernesto Villabona Alvarado. The feds would later say that Oscar gave Villabona a specific instruction: find new customers for the product in the black neighborhoods, develop the market, move the supply where the demand is growing fastest. Villabona needs a partner, someone who knows the streets, someone who can move massive quantities through communities the Colombians cannot walk into themselves. Someone who understands the math of the ghetto economy. He finds Brian Bennett. Waterhead Bo is not a gang member himself. That detail matters. His brothers are Crips, but Bo operates on a different level. He is not about territory or colors or beefs. He is about volume. He sees himself, in his own words, as the chief executive officer of a California subsidiary. Oscar is the chairman of the board, Villabona is the regional president, and Bo is the man who makes the product move. And the price Villabona gives him is the whole advantage. roughly $10,000 to $11,000 per kilo, when the competition is paying $40,000 or $50,000. That margin is not just an edge, it is an extinction event for every other supplier in America. When you are buying at 10 and everyone else is buying at 50, you do not just outsell them, you replace them. And Bo does exactly that. Within months, the Bennett-Villabona partnership is moving quantities that federal agents have never seen from a single operation. In 1 month in 1987, intercepted communications show that Bennett purchased just under 1,000 kilos from the Colombian source. In 1 month, nearly a ton of product from a single buy. At its peak, federal law enforcement will call the Bennett-Villabona partnership the largest distributorship in the country. 15,000 kilos confirmed, sold. More than any other black figure in the documented record. And Waterhead Bo is spending accordingly. He pays off his mother's mortgage on Florence Avenue, moves her to a rented home in Northridge, buys his sister Carmen a salon and a condominium, sets his brother up in a high-rise in Westwood, paying $3,000 a month in rent, buys a $200,000 house in Chatsworth with cash, then buys a furnished 5-bedroom house in Tempe, Arizona for $450,000, spots another house nearby with an indoor swimming pool and tells the realtor, "I have got to have it," buys that too for his family. In all, Bennett and his associates grab 5 houses in Tempe alone. He keeps a fleet of 10 modest vehicles for business use, drives a luxury car himself, and the overhead keeps climbing. Because when you put your whole family to work in the operation, you have to house them, car them, and feed them. But he can afford it, all of it, because the pipeline does not stop. And here is where the handshake comes back. April 1987, Las Vegas, Leonard versus Hagler. Rayful Edmond is 20 years old and already the biggest name on the streets of Washington, D.C. But Rayful has been buying from middlemen, paying too much, getting too little. He needs the source. At the fight, Rayful meets Melvin Butler. Butler is a Crip from Los Angeles who works in Bo's network, and Butler makes the introduction that changes everything. From that night forward, Rayful Edmond is buying directly from the Waterhead Bo pipeline, 300 to 500 kilograms a month, shipped from Los Angeles to Washington, D.C., month after month. The effect on D.C. is documented, not by the streets, by the federal government. In 1987, less than half of all criminal arrestees in Washington, D.C. tested positive. That is the baseline. That is what the city looked like before Rayful's supply line opened up. 14 months later, by May of 1988, 67% of arrestees tested positive, from under 50% to 67%. In 14 months, one supply line, one handshake at a boxing match, and the capital of the United States became the most devastated city in America. Rayful Edmond would later be convicted and sentenced to life. More than 30 other people went down in connection with his operation in D.C. But the supply that made all of it possible came from one man in Los Angeles, and that man's name barely appears in the D.C. story. Because the pipeline was invisible, the product moved, the money moved, and the man in the middle stayed quiet. But Rayful Edmond is not the only thread coming out of Bo's pipeline, and the next one goes somewhere nobody expects. Michael Harris. They call him Harry O. Harry O is from South Central, born on West 46th Street, a neighborhood called the Low Bottoms. He comes up affiliated with the Bounty Hunter Bloods, and by his mid-20s, he is one of the biggest figures in the Los Angeles product trade. His supplier is Waterhead Bo. Same pipeline, same Cali product, same $10,000 kilos. By 26, Michael Harris is a millionaire. And here is where the chain takes a turn that nobody in the streets could have predicted. Harry O does not just buy cars and jewelry. He does something no kingpin in Los Angeles has ever done. He produces a Broadway play, a comedy called Checkmates, starring two relatively unknown actors named Denzel Washington and Vanessa Williams. Harry O puts up the money from behind the scenes. The play opens. It is a hit, the first black-produced Broadway hit in American history. Denzel Washington, the man who will become the most acclaimed black actor of his generation, gets his start on a stage funded by a man whose money came from the same pipeline that was destroying Washington, D.C. And Harry O is not done. In 1987, Harry O is arrested, sentenced to nearly 20 years for distribution and attempted harm. He goes to federal detention in Los Angeles, and from inside his cell, he makes a phone call that creates an empire. He calls a young music manager named Marion Suge Knight. Harry O gives Suge Knight $1.5 million to start a record label. $1.5 million from a cell, from a man whose money traces back through Waterhead Bo's pipeline to the Cali cartel. The label is called Death Row Records. Within 2 years, Death Row will sign Dr. Dre, then Snoop Dogg, then Tupac Shakur. It will release The Chronic, Doggy Style, All Eyes on Me. It will define an entire era of American music. It will become the most famous, most controversial, most profitable record label in the history of hip-hop. And the seed money that started it traces back to a pipeline that runs from the poppy fields and processing labs of Colombia, through a man named Oscar, through a Colombian named Villabona, through a kid from South Central named Waterhead Bo, through a bounty hunter blood named Harry O, into a phone call from a federal cell to a man named Suge Knight. That is the chain, and nobody tells it, because each piece of the chain has its own story, and nobody steps back far enough to see how they all connect. Without Waterhead Bo's pipeline, Harry O does not become a millionaire. Without Harry O's millions, there is no $1.5 million for Suge Knight. Without Suge Knight's money, there is no Death Row Records. Without Death Row, there is no Chronic, no Doggy Style, no All Eyes on Me. Tupac signs somewhere else. Snoop signs somewhere else. Dr. Dre stays with Eazy-E. The entire trajectory of West Coast hip-hop changes. And on the other coast, without Bo's pipeline feeding Rayful Edmond, the D.C. epidemic looks completely different. The supply lines are slower, more expensive, less pure. The numbers do not spike the way they spike. The 30-plus convictions that came out of Rayful's case do not happen the way they happen. One man, in the middle, connecting the cartel to the music to the money, and the money to the destruction of a city 3,000 miles away. And here is how it all falls apart. It starts with a speeding ticket. November 6, 1988. Two of Harry O's delivery men are driving a van on a highway in Missouri. They are doing 68 in a 55 zone. Missouri state troopers pull them over. Inside the van, the troopers find over 1,000 pounds of product. They also find a cellular telephone. And programmed into the memory of that phone, neatly and tidily, are two numbers. One belongs to Brian Bennett in Tempe, Arizona. The other belongs to a Los Angeles company linked to Mario Villabona. A speeding ticket, 13 miles over the limit. And the phone in the van connects two numbers that give a California judge enough cause to authorize a wiretap on Villabona's house in Malibu. And then the wiretap catches everything. Because Waterhead Bo, by this point, is not even in the country. He is in Denmark, with a woman, conducting business by phone from across the Atlantic Ocean, as if the distance alone makes him untouchable. At the request of the DEA, Danish police are listening, and they hear Bo and Villabona order 2,000 pounds of product. They hear the Cali bosses complain that Villabona is $3.3 million behind in his payments. They hear Villabona, indignant, ask his handlers to prove that he is short. Meanwhile, near the Detroit Metropolitan Airport, federal agents seize $5.4 million in cash connected to the operation. The net closes. In November of 1988, both Waterhead Bo and Villabona are arrested. The 3-year investigation is over. At trial, all 6 defendants are convicted. Operating a continuing criminal enterprise. Conspiracy to possess thousands of kilos with intent to distribute. The judge, William J. Rhee, looks at Waterhead Bo and Mario Villabona and sentences them both to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Life, no parole. Bo is 25 years old. The judge tells them both, "You do not know what damage you have done to other people." There may have been dozens or hundreds of crimes committed by reason of these substances. It has got to be stopped. If we do not stop them, we are going to be in terrible, terrible shape. Villabona, standing in front of the man who just took his life, asks the judge a question. "Man to man, as a friend, I want to know why. When it is my first offense, why the government has to tell you how to sentence me." The judge does not answer. Michael Harris, the man whose millions funded Broadway and death row, is sentenced separately, 19 years and 7 months, and the chain that connected the Cali cartel to everything goes dark. But the things that chain created did not go dark. They kept going. They kept growing. They kept shaping the culture in ways that the man in the middle never imagined and never profited from. Death Row Records went on to sell tens of millions of records. Tupac became the most iconic figure in the history of hip-hop. Snoop became a household name. Dr. Dre became a billionaire. And Waterhead Bo sat in a cell. Denzel Washington went on to win 2 Academy Awards. The biggest black movie star in the world. His career launched on a stage funded by money that came from the same pipeline, and Waterhead Bo sat in a cell. Rayful Edmond's operation was dismantled. Over 30 people convicted. Washington, D.C. spent the next decade trying to recover from what the pipeline had done to it. And Waterhead Bo sat in a cell. The U.S. attorney at the time of sentencing said it plainly. This is the single most important partnership in U.S. history established between a major South Central dealer and the Colombians. The single most important, not one of, the. And the man at the center of it was 25 years old when they locked the door. So what do you take from the story of Waterhead Bo? Take the chain. One man in South Central Los Angeles connected a Colombian cartel to the streets of Black America. His pipeline fed the man who destroyed Washington, D.C. His pipeline funded the man who launched Denzel Washington on Broadway. His pipeline seeded the money that built Death Row Records and gave the world Tupac, Snoop, and Dre. He did not plan any of it. He did not set out to change the music or destroy a city or launch an actor's career. He set out to move product at a price nobody could beat. And the ripple effects of that one decision touched every corner of Black American culture for the next 30 years. A handshake at a boxing match in Las Vegas in April of 1987. That is all it took. One handshake, and the Cali cartel was connected to everything. Subscribe to Bloody Reports. There are 1,000 stories like this one that nobody has told the right way yet. This was one of them.